Yeah, I think Carson is mature enough to handle being able to come back to Philadelphia and competing for the job. But why would he want to? I feel like, and that's no attack against the Eagles personally, but as a player, you've been benched. You've shown that you needed protection, you needed more weapons around you, and they used a second-round pick, which is a high pick, on a quarterback. Not someone to protect you, not another receiver to throw the ball to. And that doesn't show to me, even though you pay me money, that doesn't show me that you're trying to build around me. So the combination of that and actually being benched shows me that it could happen again. And if I were Carson, that's being selfish as a player, I would want to go somewhere else to compete simply because I know my value has a ceiling in Philadelphia.
All right, so let me then just ask you very directly. Do you believe Carson Wentz can be a great quarterback in the National Football League?
I know Carson Wentz can be a great quarterback, but you need these things to happen. You need great protection or solid protection, and that's important. And it's not just for Carson Wentz. We saw what happened in the Super Bowl with the best player in the league, and Patrick Mahomes, how he looked when he didn't have protection. You also need formidable weapons around you and guys that you've had an offseason with. That wasn't able to happen this year. Carson, and also that goes up front with the big guys as well. He had 25 different offensive line combinations. Now, Carson is responsible for some of it. There were some poor decisions being made, but the environment wasn't like the most successful place, or the easiest place for a quarterback to be successful. And I just think that's one thing that weighed on him. And you saw what happened when he had that environment. If you could recreate that environment, you could bring Carson Wentz back to the man that I know him to be.
So, Dominic, this is not contrary, but certainly somewhat different from what most of the conventional wisdom on Carson Wentz has been here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can recreate that environment, you could turn just about any quarterback in the league to a great one. That offensive line was the best in the league. That defensive line was dominant. And he was so lucky that year also with like third and longs. Like, it was a great season. And I think Carson Wentz is not a bad, terrible quarterback like he looked last year. But if you're a mediocre quarterback and things fall off, or if you're a great quarterback and things fall off around you, you become a mediocre quarterback. He wasn't even mediocre last year. And I understand the idea that people see hope in the player that Carson Wentz can be, but he needs to follow that up with some production, and he hasn't had that in a while. And I do think that part of this is he is not necessarily built for a city like Philadelphia or a team like the Eagles. And I'm not sure Chicago is going to be much kinder to him. They don't have a great situation there offensively, and their media and fans are just as tough on their quarterbacks as Chicago is. And I know Chicago is one of the leading places where Wentz is going to go. I'm not so sure that he's going to go there and follow Nick Foles there and have more success in Chicago than he had in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, all the talk about Indianapolis, to the point you just made, Dominique, I think a lot of quarterbacks could go to Indianapolis and have success because the situation is tailor-made. Dan Graziano, just to be clear, though, on what Ron Jaworski is saying, this whole idea that Carson Wentz is about to get traded, that's Wentz-driven, right? As much as anything else, right? It is he who is driving wanting him out of Philadelphia. At least I believe that is the conventional wisdom. Is that an accurate perception?
Yeah, I think that's how it generated. Obviously, it's reached a point where the team and the player agree, right? I mean, the Eagles are working on trading him, and I believe that they will. So it got to a point where he doesn't want to be there. Let's move on. But yeah, I think that's how it started. Was Wentz telling them or letting it be known that he didn't want to be there. I think he'll end up out of town. Colts would be a preferable destination, as you mentioned, because of the offensive line situation. But I think it'll be one of those two teams, and it'll be sometime in the next couple of weeks.
So why hasn't it happened yet, Dan? We had heard it was imminent. Why hasn't it happened yet?
The only real deadline on this would be March 20th, which is a date on which Carson Wentz will receive a $10 million roster bonus. Now, if you're the Eagles and you know you're not going to have him on this year's team, you would like his new team to pay that instead of paying it yourself. So that's really the deadline. So until you get to the point where you feel like no one's going to offer any more, then there's no reason to really pull the trigger yet on this. So they've been out there trying to see if they could get the offers to improve. I think they're at a point where they know what it's going to be ultimately, or close to it, and it's something that could happen probably pretty soon. Though, again, if they decided to wait, it's because they had some hope of improving the offer.
And so quickly, Tori, I mean, you were there for the whole Carson-Nick Foles saga. If they were to do what Jaws is talking about and bring Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts both back, I believe you said at the beginning of this conversation, you think he's mentally tough enough for that. Do you think that is a circumstance that could work if it is what happens?
I believe so. I mean, as a player, your job is to compete. As a receiver, I've been on teams and they've drafted endless receivers. Dominique's been a cornerback. They're going to always draft people to be behind you.
Yep.
Now, for some reason in the NFL, quarterbacks are very fragile, right? And you have to build around them, and it should be that way. Because I feel like those are the leaders of your team, and they want to be sure it's their team. As a receiver, it's never your team. But as a quarterback, that matters.
Yes, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, as the receiver, it's your team. Everyone in the stands is there to see you. There's no question of that, regardless of who is throwing you the ball. Okay, meanwhile, I had an absolutely great moment on my radio show yesterday. We'll make this Meanwhile on Planet Earth, which is brought to you by Whole Foods. I had the legendary Dan Dierdorf on my radio show yesterday, member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, longtime announcer, and he, unprompted, said this.
I watch Get Up every morning. Now, I don't watch it live because I tape it, but I got to tell you, the reason I watch it is that I like to laugh, and you guys make me laugh. Some of your sidekicks are genuinely funny people, and that, that's the best part of your show is the way you guys, don't take yourselves too seriously.
So that was an unprompted compliment from one of the genuine legends in pro football history. And Dominique, as one of my favorite sidekicks,
We stop that right now. We're not going to perpetuate this. Like, that felt like a compliment, and I was like, oh, nice. The Hall of Famer appreciates me. That feels good. Then he called me a sidekick while he's sitting there looking like a chauffeur. Like, aren't you inside your house? Why you got on that driving hat if you inside your house, chauffeur Dierdorf? What happened? What'd you do with all that announcing money that you got to be driving people right now in this pandemic, man? Take that hat off.
This is the second legend you are now going to get in a fight with. First, you question whether Terry Bradshaw belongs in the Hall of Fame or not. He accosts me in a hotel lobby because of what you said. Now, Dan Dierdorf pays our show a compliment, and you are somehow so sensitive that you're letting the word sidekick offend you.
First of all, I have nothing bad to say about the original TB12. Terry Bradshaw is my favorite quarterback of all time. I love you, Terry. But Dan, me and you got beef. Don't let me see you in the streets, man. That's a sidekick? I'm nobody's Robin. Look at this face. This is a Batman face.
I mean, of course, and Tori, I just want to make sure you're aware of what you're stepping into here today. The original kings of comedy did come from Culture Wednesday on this program, and you see them lined up there, the legends that they are. And listen, I mean, however we don't describe it, Tori, your thoughts on all of this?
Hey, I'm ready for the tour when everything's open and they can fill up the arenas.
Tori, you're in. And Graziano, you're a huge part of what we do here all the time, and everyone's laughing all the time, and you're contributing to this. Don't you think it's nice what Dan Dierdorf said?
I do think it's nice. I don't have an ego the size of Dominique Foxworth to the point where the word sidekick would bother me. Happy to be a sidekick here on Wednesdays. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I contribute what I can, and I'm glad that people are watching and enjoying it. That's how I feel, because I'm a team guy, Greeny. I'm a team-first guy, and I'm not going to get too worked up over these kinds of, the labels that people throw around.
Dan, your ego's not as big because you're not as good as me. That's what it comes down to. That's the bottom line. Like, you know who says they're team guys? Guys who need the team. I am a star. I don't need none of y'all. Give me my own show. I'm done with this.
Very well played. And Dan Dierdorf, we love you. You're the best. As we continue, should the Bucs pursue the amazing talents of Odell Beckham or bring back Chris Godwin? Got answers to questions like those as we roll on. Get up.